Welcome to Selling in the Age of AI.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So,
Must-listen podcast for sales professionals who lean into technology without leaning on it. Dive into the future of sales with your hosts, the dynamic and inspiring Frank Somma, renowned keynote speaker, best-selling author, seminar leader, and business coach. Get ready for game-changing insights and strategies that value technology but place humanity at the top of the sales pyramid.
Sid Roe is the head of revenue for Indium. Sid is a passionate advocate for the independent insurance agent model and an avid biker, runner, and swimmer, and triathlete, I might mention. Our story, Sid's and mine that is a proof of concept, if you will, for this podcast. We shared a stage at the Big I New Jersey conference back in 2019. I gravitated towards Sid immediately. Then I watched her get up on stage. I hope you remember this, Sid. She began by doing a giant selfie with a crowd of 500 people standing and cheering. It was a masterclass in owning the stage, authenticity, and human connection. The reason I say this is a proof of concept for this podcast is because those moments, those human-to-human moments between Sid and me became indelible in my brain. We don't live near one another, and we haven't done anything together since then, but that connection brought us to this podcast 5.5 years later. That's the power of humanity, or maybe it's the power of Sydney Roe. I don't know. But welcome, my friend. I am coming out of my skin with excitement to have you here with me.
I am so excited to be here, Frank. It's been too long, so I'm ready to go.
Well, you know, what's interesting, the podcast Selling in the Age of AI is meant to talk to sales professionals about the human connection. And I think it's most important. I've done a lot of work in insurance. So I do consulting for agencies. I do sales training, customer service training for independent insurance agencies. I speak on stages at Big I events, and I do some one-on-one coaching for some producers. So even though I didn't grow up in the insurance business, I just gravitated toward it, and a lot of my clients are there. And the reason for that, I believe, is that it's the responsibility in insurance to be a good human is greater than in almost any other business I can think of. Like if I sell you the wrong voice over IP system, you can get another one. But if I undercover you insurance, you can't return it. You know, you don't know until it's too late. So Sid, talk about the human connection and responsibility for independent insurance agencies.
Yeah, I appreciate you starting with just the high level on the industry itself, because your listeners may not have let's put it this way. I think a lot of people have a necessary evil mindset around insurance, just because of sometimes the way that they've interacted with the system on an individual level.
Yeah.
And I think there are those stories out there, but as a whole, if you look at the arc of the industry, where we're headed it has a very noble spirit to it, right? It has the reason that it was created, and the movement that it's always making, and its growth is towards a place of trying to help people in their darkest, toughest times. And that is a very fulfilling place to be, I would say. And I'll get into the logistics of this in a sec, but there's a lot of different ways to buy insurance. You can buy directly from a company, call the 1-800 number. You can go through a human being, but that human being is kind of locked into a company. We call that captive insurance. And then there's independent insurance agents, which to me is the purest form of the model, in that it allows for the most freedom and choice for the customer, for the agent, and then also kind of keeps carriers, how do I put this? Kind of keeps them on their toes, I would say, right? Because there's a little more competition. And so there's to me that independent space probably has the most human connection, or the most need for human connection, out of all three models. And what's crazy is the financial, if you look at the financial nature of each of those three sectors, the financial piece actually supports the need for human connection, right? So what I mean by that is, if you look at the, um, you know, profitability of working in the independent space, it's actually to look at companies that work in both. They go direct, they go independent, Progressive, even Geico's now is getting into the independent space. They're all realizing that that human connection is very meaningful. It means at a ground level, we get to know the people we work with. We can place the right insurance. We're not just throwing coverage out a window, hoping it gets, it lands somewhere. And there's that lifetime value is really important, right? People stay with people they like, know, and trust. And, you see that most often in the independent space. So yeah, Frank, like yes, this could not be a better podcast for the independent model, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have clients in all different walks of life, from pharmaceutical companies to office automation companies. But I really feel that way, and I was taught something. In Michigan, I met a guy who is the president of an independent insurance agency. His name is Larry Michael, and Larry said to me, when we were talking about humanity and insurance and point and click technology and how you compete, he looked at me and he said, well, Frank, who are you going to call on your worst day?
Yeah.
And man, that knocked me out, Sid. I mean, the gravity with which he said that conveyed the entire independent insurance model to me.
Well said. Well said. That's why he's the president of that insurance agency.
Yeah. And I mean, just fantastic. So it's, when I think about the tech though, first of all, I want to learn a little bit more about Indium and
Yeah.
what you do as the head of revenue there. And then I
Yeah.
want to go on to a little bit of technology, but let's start with your current company and what you're doing.
So I will preface this with I've been at Indium for about 4 months. So of course, I don't have the depth of knowledge as some who have been working there for years. But I have been in the insurance industry since I was a kid, and I've seen the evolution of what we call the network space.
Mm-hmm.
Indium was founded in 2005, so 20 years ago, almost exactly on the dot, in a time when the idea of aggregation didn't exist.
Okay.
And what I mean by aggregation is agencies banding together to appear larger than they are
Okay.
in order to have more meaningful conversations with their carrier partners.
Mm-hmm.
So 20 years ago, rewind, this idea didn't exist. And that meant that it was, and carriers have their own challenges, but it was difficult, I would say, for agencies in times where carriers were meeting with those challenges to keep their appointments with carriers. Because the carrier would come and say, well, we have these pretty high standards on growth rate and the volume of premium and your loss ratio, and you're just not meeting those standards. And so, it's not that we want to not do business with you, but we just don't know how to make it work with our model. And so, especially 20 years ago, this was happening sort of left and right. Agencies were losing appointments. It was a tough time economically, and Indium and some other networks started appearing. And the idea was, again, to band together and say, well, if we take Frank's book of business, which is 20 million, because you look like a successful guy, and we take Sid's book and we take whoever else, and we band that together. Wow, this looks a lot bigger. And so we could take this and we could go to carriers and say, hey, together we can meet the requirements you have around production. So now Indium today went from 0 carriers in about 20 years to 38 carriers we can offer to agencies for we call it market access. So if they have a business that walks through their doors or an individual that needs insurance and they don't have a direct contract with a carrier who has products that can serve that business or those individuals, we can help. They can come to us and we can partner with them to get that placed. So now here's that's sort of networks, right? A 30,000 foot view. Here's where Indium specifically, I think, leads the way into the future for the network space.
Okay.
This was 5 or 6 years ago now. The PE space came into insurance. And, money was very cheap. And it was very easy to come in and start. Where's the opportunity for PEs, right? A little bit of technology, a little bit, hey, we're going to buy some insurance agencies. And then all of a sudden it became, okay, well, what's next? Oh, networks. We're going to buy network. We'll get all these if we buy a network, we get 200, 300 agencies in one go. And so you started to see networks selling out to PE.
Yeah.
Well, where the money goes, the values go.
Sure.
And I wouldn't say that in every case, there was a close alignment with the true mission of those networks after they sold.
You are very diplomatic.
That's where it goes. So, and with Indium, we did sell last year, but we sold to another agency network that's much larger than ours and within their own contract, their creed, cannot sell to a private equity firm or out to the public space. So we've essentially guaranteed Indium's future to be true to its original mission, which is to continue helping and serving independent agents. And Frank, you and I know each other decently well. My dad's an insurance agent. This space means a lot to me personally. If I look back on my deathbed and say, okay, what did I do with my life? I want to make sure that I left it better than I found it.
Yeah.
And that means, digging my heels in and saying, okay, maybe not every path forward is the right path. Let's make sure we're balancing that with aligning to our true core values. So
Yeah, it's interesting, Sid, because what you're explaining to me, which is really cool, is that if I'm a little player, if I'm hang my shingle out and I'm Frankie's independent insurance agency and I can't attract carriers because I can't bring them enough business to get an ear. And listen, it's like any other business, that if I have a client in office automation space, if that client doesn't buy enough inventory from their manufacturer, then the manufacturer says, well, your price is going to be higher, or we can't sell to you anymore. So there's, but in those businesses, they have an independent, they'll have a council of business owners that gets together to talk to the manufacturer, but they're not coming with weight together. What you're describing is a very different scenario where they're combined, they're coming together, which is really cool. I like that idea, and it lets the little independent person that wants to do good work for their clients have the ability to buy like the bigger folks and compete.
yes, absolutely. And I would say, there's this little thing in the insurance industry called, a lot of people call it incentive compensation, profit sharing, contingency, but it's basically just a bonus for the business at the end of the year if their book performs well and produces well. There are certain advantages that are given to very, very large agencies that the middle America market doesn't have, Main Street America market doesn't have. And so by banding together, we can actually help achieve some of those advantages, which then comes back to the agency. And it could be investment in technology, it could be more people, it could be a number of different things, but just some sort of opportunity for them to choose what their future path looks like.
But it's interesting because this has happened. This is business forever, right? I had a butcher shop, and then supermarkets came in, and I was out of business because I couldn't compete with the buying levels that they had. And then it came back around, and you see butcher shops, small of them, opening up because the attention to detail and the expertise is once again being appreciated. And what you
Yes.
all are doing is allowing that small person who has the attention to detail be appreciated, be able to compete even price wise. Like when I go to Mikey's Meats down the street, I'm paying a lot more, but it's worth it to me because I know the quality is better than the supermarket. But what you all are doing is you're allowing Mikey's Meats to compete at a price level with
Yes.
the supermarket, which is
Yes.
just a home run. I love that. I want to switch gears real quick and go
Yeah.
to the technology and what the sales professional listening to this podcast. I first want to say to that sales professional, the thing to understand is you are unique. You're bringing to your clients something no one else can do. And when you learn that and get it in your bones and realize that what they're buying is you, I can point and click for anything that you're offering me. But the nuances of the business and the human connection is what you have to offer. And realize that there are people that don't do it well. So you've got to believe when you're meeting that new client that they are in the best hands possible with you. I understand some of you are just starting out new. Some of you see professionals that are crushing it and you go, boy, I'll never be that good. Don't do that. Understand that what you're bringing is you, and only you can bring that experience. And especially in this business, that's what you're selling.
That was well said. That was very well said. And I think something to keep in mind in the AI conversation, because there's definitely the fear-based approach, which is, oh no, it's going to replace me. And, I think from that angle, my thought process is it can't. If you are the thing, right? The secret sauce, the magic,
Yes.
no AI that could replace you. That, I mean, we are so far away from even coming close to replacing the uniqueness of an individual human.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's the other side of it, which I think are those who are so excited about it that they see it as this thing that, not that they want it to replace them, but they almost want it to do 80 or 90% of what they do. And
Right.
I think you have to make sure you balance the limitations of where we're at today and
Mm-hmm.
remember that it's powerful, but it's still not quite that powerful.
I
So,
mean, during your career, you've run with technology a lot. And, from the operations side of the business and all that, the tech is relevant, yeah?
oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think AI, absolutely. There's so much that we can do. We can show up more prepared for every meeting because of AI. We can know our clients better than we ever could have before. And the thing that we all have to keep in mind is, I said it to you, I think, before we began, you've got to get very good at the one thing that AI will never be good at, and that is human to human connection. So in your business, when you think about the best sales professionals that you've seen in the independent channel or wherever, what do you think of the qualities, maybe a couple top two or three that those folks have?
Oh yeah. Well, I think one, they have focus on and specificity, and this may be unique to insurance, but there are agencies out there that almost want to be generalists, and I think it comes from a good place. Hey, I want to be able to serve anybody that's in my local community. But I think the agents and sales teams that I see that are just crushing it are the ones that say, I can't serve everyone. There's a fit that I have. Maybe it's because of my personality, my background, my experience, my upbringing, my connections, my network, where I went to school, or a combination of all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a group of people out there that I know I can serve really, really well, and I'm going to focus on that specific group. So I think that's one piece of it. Um, and I think too, those that bring their themselves and their personality into it as well, right? Not losing sometimes sales can be a tough gig when you're just crunching through the calls or emails or the pipelines. And I think, making sure you're finding where to add your personalization, connect with the human being on the other end of the line, and not just see it as that routine, monotonous, volume of phone calls or communications I have to
Right.
send out. And then just a relentlessness, like just an absolute relentlessness, a lack of, fear of rejection and, a desire to just drive and get to the other side.
Yeah, I agree with you that persistence is a huge thing. And the fear of rejection is super interesting to me because I remember sales trainers way back in the day saying to me, it isn't personal. They're rejecting your product, not you. No, I'm sorry, it's fiercely personal.
Yeah.
I am the difference in my business, and
Yeah.
it's okay to take it. Salespeople, be personal, take it personally, and
Yeah.
then what I want you to do is turn it upside down. And Sid, I want to know, how you feel about this, but turn it upside down. When someone rejects my offer, let's say I'm an independent insurance person, I've done my homework, I know what you need. I'm making sure I'm giving you the absolute depth of coverage that you need. If God forbid tragedy strikes you, you're going to be okay on the economic side of that, right? So I've done my due diligence. I know it. It's not just, somebody looked at your deck page real quick and ran on. I really dug in. And you reject me for a cheaper offer.
Mm.
I don't feel bad for me. I feel bad for you. You had a
Mm.
chance to buy from the best there is, who does the work, who is earnest and sincere and has your best interest at heart, and you opted for a cheaper solution. I
Yeah.
I feel bad for you, and then I have to come back and question myself, why was I not able to communicate to you that that was my value?
Mm.
You think?
Yeah. Gosh, I hope you carve out that sound bite and post it on LinkedIn. That was well said.
The production team is listening. They will do that.
Okay.
My guys are terrific.
Yeah, that was just nail on the head. Uh yeah, I think that's a hard one to follow up, Frank. I
Like, can you think of how folks can, we're talking about taking it personally or not. Why it's okay to take it personally, but you can't feel bad personally. Like, I want you to flip the script, and the only part of it to feel bad about is examine, and maybe you can help me with that. Like, how do you make sure folks know that you have their best interest at heart, or that you're not necessarily going to be the least expensive option?
Yeah, when I was thinking back to a story my dad told me,
Mhm.
I was trying to remember the details of it, so I may get some of this wrong, but we're going to call it 75% right.
Good.
Essentially, a business friend of his, somebody who in the construction industry, because that's his niche,
Hmm.
uh, who had become a good friend of his, decided to decline some coverage. And it ended up, the situation ended up being one where he needed it. There was a claim that wasn't covered, and it was a very, like, almost $1 million claim.
Wow.
Like, he built very, very expensive homes. And he ended up taking my dad to court. And, I my dad had all the paperwork to prove that he had offered the coverage, and essentially this guy wasn't going to get money out of him.
Hmm.
The agency, there was no E&O, exposure there.
Right.
But I think more so my dad, I remember talking through this with him at the time. He was just more upset that he had lost that relationship with this person. And crazy enough, the guy came back a year or two later after trying to work with some other agents and realizing that he actually really appreciated the service and, partnership that my dad gave him.
Hmm.
Um, and my dad turned him down. And this was a huge account. I mean, we're talking like well, it's a lot of money, a lot of revenue, a lot of premium for for my dad's agency. It would have meant, an extra vacation. And my dad said, nope, we've been down that road. I just can't go down it again with you. I don't trust you. And I think now this is a situation that's a little different than a salesperson starting out saying, gosh, I wish someone would say yes, right? And I keep getting the rejection. But remember that there's like I think the idea here is you have that power more so than I think you realize when you're really good at what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You get those yeses and be careful of them. Not every yes is the yes you want. You want that person that you can trust, that understands the value that you bring and isn't just in it for the price.
Right.
Um, because you end up with tough situations where, uh, the things don't always work out. And so maybe you get the yes up front because you were $2 cheaper. But what kind of relationship are you building? What kind of connection do you have truly
Mm-hmm.
in the long term? So yeah, again, you said it better than I, but that was the story that came to my mind.
It's a great, great story, and it's because for a couple of reasons. Cream comes to the top, right? So if listen, it doesn't always, karma doesn't always come around the corner with its, headlights, brights on and blaring its horn.
Yeah,
But karma is a thing, right? It really does happen. So
yeah,
I believe that story tells me a lot about that, you have to stay the course, do the right thing, and you're going to lose some people who just don't get it. And not what you just said, Sid, is huge. Not everybody's your client,
yeah.
right?
Some
Not everybody could be your customer.
Someone told me early on in my career because I was struggling with I was very vocal in my career around being on YouTube and speaking. That's how we met. And honestly, I would say things that ruffled people's feathers sometimes
Okay.
and didn't quite land. And sometimes it was just my own immaturity and naivety. And sometimes it was, no, I really do believe that. And we just have a difference of opinion and it's okay to have conflict. But he looked at me and he said, Sid, you have to have a hater quota. Like if you don't have a hater quota, you're doing something wrong. You're not using your voice, you're not speaking up. That's a good thing. And it's something clicked in that moment and I went, "Oh, okay, good. If I don't get some no's, I'm doing something wrong."
Yeah, a hater quoter. I've heard it said other ways, but never like that. Like,
Yeah.
you have to have so many no's before you get to a yes and things like
Yeah.
that. But that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, the hater quoter. That's one that we have to quote out. That's great. So going on and thinking about selling today with the technology available, what do you think? I mean, we'll talk about it in your business because that's your experience. But how has the tech helped? Can you give us some examples of how selling is different in 2025 than it was in 2005?
Yeah. It's funny, I just talked to a startup company that's looking to come into insurance. They help with email communication. They'll essentially um, draft responses for you to emails that have been sitting in your inbox for longer than a certain period of time. And I'm on the phone with this guy and I'm like, wow, but how does it draft a unique response, right? Like because if someone's emailing me saying, hey, I would love to schedule a time to talk, or sure, I could see AI getting back on that level. But insurance is so nuanced,
Yeah.
needed to know, very in-depth coverage, policy definitions and be able to read specific policies with endorsements and, um, even like just little things like if someone says, "Oh, and I hope Disney World went well with your kids" or something like that. Like, how is it going to respond? And he explained how essentially what they do is they set up a data lake for your company's main inbox, and so it's learning about the individuals in the company, but also about the company itself, and it's able to respond based upon how much it's learned about you through past emails.
Wow.
Um, and so, I think about like especially in sales, also our service team, the number of emails that we get on a daily basis or weekly basis is just it's a lot. So to be able to have something that can support replying in a timely fashion would be really amazing. Um, the other the other interesting, which, Frank, I won't lie, I'm like a little on the fence with this one. I'm curious to see how it plays out,
Okay.
but they help with the full sales process and some of the service process in terms of like what I would call data movement. So in insurance, data is really the product. You can't quote a policy or get a policy without a lot of data.
Right.
And and so to collect that data from the insured or from the client or prospect, to get it into your system, to send it to the carrier for them to send back verification, hey, are we sure about this car? And we don't have this.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I mean, data falls through the cracks, it gets missed, it takes a long time. And so it's very expensive too for a person to be moving that data back and forth up and down the distribution chain. So this AI company supposedly helps with that. So you can take an email, you can forward it to this AI email, and it will take all that information, get a quote, and bring the quote back to you.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm like on the fence to hear how this goes, because if it works, it could be, I mean, incredibly game changing for the industry. I think as an industry, we've struggled with how do we move this data?
Oh, sure.
Do we build APIs? Do we build new portals? I mean, we've tried everything, and to have this new tech AI that could essentially act as a, intelligent person that can move this data to the right place at the right time and get things back for you would be, it would save a lot of people a lot of time, and refocus us on the relationship piece. So
I mean, Sid, let's look at this like the Pareto law, right? A 80-20 thing. So
yeah,
20% of the things that you have to do in your email require you, but a lot of it really doesn't. 20% of the data movement may be so huge and so nuanced that it requires you got to put eyes on it. But there's a lot of it that doesn't. There's a lot of it that's a little bit more mundane. So the idea of freeing you up from these tasks, right? I mean, I used to sweep my patio, 50 years ago in my dad's house, and now I have a blower.
yeah,
Like, it's a million times faster. So
yes,
it's
yes,
okay. It frees me up to do the things I like to do. And that's the idea, I think, having the tech that frees you up, as you said, to focus then on the relationship, because that's the part that you need to do well. And all of
yes,
the, for sales professionals, the data side of things can be cumbersome. And like you said, especially distribution, right? What if you can't get it done here and you have to get it done there? It really isn't an easy way
yeah,
for carriers to get the information, and it's hard. Chris Klein and I were talking, and Chris was talking about hiring people to do
yeah,
that, and that how your bottom line takes a hit, with the extra body on board, but eventually he thinks the profitability increases by taking the weight off of the producer, putting it on
mm,
this other person that you hire to do these kinds of things, that really don't need the producer's attention necessarily. But then in that equation, it assumes that the producer's using that time to produce.
right. Well, of course, yeah, yeah. I think Chris, and I love Chris. He's a gem. Well said on his part. But two, I mean, that's expensive to hire someone to move data. I mean, that is, you know, salaries aren't cheap.
No, it's the biggest part of your bottom line. People are the most expensive part of your business always.
Yeah, so if there was some smart tech that could help with that, again, on the other hand, I'm skeptical of seeing it as a silver bullet. I've been guilty of that myself in the past, saying, oh, there's API, oh, there's blockchain, everybody get on block, it'll be great, and here we are 5, 6 years later, and nobody's really on blockchain. So I'm skeptical but hopeful, I would say.
Um, think about this for a second. Can you tell me a time, with somebody that you know as a professional, or even in your own life, that the relationship was the deciding factor in a competitive environment?
Ooh, the relationship was the deciding fact. So someone choosing between me and someone else, and they chose me due to relationship.
Yeah.
Um, Interesting. Yes. Um, so this was it feels like 2 lifetimes ago, but 2 jobs ago. I was at a startup company called Be Atomic, and we had a product called Neon.
Hmm.
And I would say that every client we brought on in the first 6 months chose us because of relationship,
Wow.
because we weren't where we wanted to be, right? We didn't have we had a very loose minimum viable product, something that just got us off the ground.
Okay.
And to to explain the impact of their decision, um, businesses often have a lot of different technology, and some of that technology is what I would call business critical or mission critical, and
Hmm.
that is supportive. And the
Okay.
supportive stuff, you can make decisions, you can change things, and it's not going to really impact the business. You make decisions on that business critical, mission critical tech, and it's a big change for the business.
Hmm.
What we were building was business critical tech. And so that it was a weighty decision that agencies were making to come on board. Um, and they trusted us. Um, and so, I honestly, that is why I take my role very seriously, taking a job very seriously, taking my work very seriously. I've been in the industry for a long time, grew up in it, and I'm very careful about what I tell people. And, you know,
Hmm.
that's only become more so as I've grown in my career. So, yeah, I think too, the insurance industry is very relationship driven. You've probably noticed this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm working with a client in Michigan, and we were pressing hard to have more referrals, and did it. Increased referrals year over year. Not because of me. I began the program for them and did some training, but
Yeah.
because they understood relationships, and they understood that basic concept that to me is super important. It's that everyone that you run into, if you think you're great at this, like we went back, right? Let's rewind the tape back to where we were. That's how old I am, the tape. But let's go back to where we talked about before with setting yourself apart by knowing that you're going to do well for people and that there are others that will not.
Yeah.
So that means that everyone that you run into, don't you owe it to them to talk about insurance? Isn't it wrong of you not to? Couldn't they be in the hands of someone that's not doing the right thing for them? And you being an expert, shouldn't you offer to examine that? And haven't
Yeah.
you done them a disservice if you don't?
Absolutely.
So that's the view,
Absolutely.
right?
I love that. I love that. Yes, I think wise words. Yeah, too many of us, I think, get caught in the oh, I don't want to bother people with, again, not necessary evil, but this is something a lot of people struggle with. Most people can't read their policy. They don't know what coverage they have. They don't understand how things work, what they should do if something goes wrong. And
Right.
uh, if you're working with someone that you trust, that those questions tend to be less. And uh, you know,
Mhm.
yeah, I would agree.
So what do you think if I'm a professional salesperson, whatever industry, what do you think of some of the components that go into initially, like how do I get you to trust me right off the bat? Can you think of some of the things that you do naturally? Because you have that. People love you when they meet you, whatever it is that I don't, breaking down that charisma. I could probably do it given time, but what do you think goes into the idea that when you meet someone, they feel comfortable? How can you advise me as a sales professional to make folks feel comfortable and lean toward trusting me?
Yeah. Gosh, I will say this. I've met enough people in my career in the insurance industry to know that I am actually not that great at sales. There are some agents that are just incredible. And when I think about them and the charisma and the skill set that they have, they, I think there's this, listen, I'm a spiritual person. I believe in energy. I believe in, a God. And I think that there is when you get in the room, you can feel that they care, that they have the right intention. There's just this sense of knowing that like they're out there to have your best interest in mind. So yeah, that's a very internal place to start. I think it's easier to say, well, what clothes are you wearing? And what did you say? And those are things that are easier to control than like, okay, what are your intentions and motivations? Because that's deep work. But I think truly that's where it starts, right? I mean, the people that are in it and are just very successful just have this passion for serving those that are on the other side of their business. So that's one piece of it.
Oh my God.
Oh,
How did that happen when it's on Do Not Disturb?
by the way, that is a classic ringtone.
Wow.
I
That's
love that.
old school ringtone. And I put that on Do Not Disturb for the duration of our meeting. So much for my ability with technology.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think gosh, I'm trying to think the other pieces that I've seen. They have this ability to qualify who they're talking to, right? I think, again, you can't serve everyone. They
Mm.
know the people that they serve best. They know that, hey, if you're a business owner over this size or this type of business owner, or maybe you just have a slightly different value system or whatever those factors are in their mind, they're kind of internally processing like, yeah, okay, I'm talking, it's not like a Spanish Inquisition, but as we're getting to know
Oh,
each
yeah.
other, I'm starting to think like, I don't know if that fits. Like they know what that match looks like. And so I think as they start to like ask those questions and get answers back that are affirming, like, yep, this person's it almost like organically just kind of tail spins and goes, yeah,
Well,
like
yeah,
this.
like break that down. I mean, what you're saying, the two components of that, I think that was absolute genius. It couldn't be better. So it's not about what you say. And here's the deal. I'm brand new at it, so I say, well, tell me what to say. Tell me how to act. Tell me what to wear. Tell me what. No. When you come from a place of authenticity, like you said, when your intention is pure, then the things that come out of you will
Yeah,
have that. They'll be flavored by that, and folks will feel that. And that's where charisma, rapport, that's where it happens. But Sid, you're 1,000% spot on. It comes from an internal place. So if you're well intentioned, it'll come. And then the second half of that, that was so interesting about being able to say, hey, maybe you're not my client, or maybe this isn't a fit, that also comes from a place of maturity, because if I've done the work and I've got a lot of possibilities, I'm going to be able to say, perhaps Sid's not the best client for me. But if I haven't done the work and I'm desperate, I'm going to try to put that square peg in a round hole, and I'm going to have myself a whole lot of trouble. Then I'm not going to be authentic. Then the whole thing unwinds. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, the word desperate, right, comes from this need for, it's almost like an excessive need for validation or reassurance or whatever it is. And ultimately, you don't want something from them, they want something from you, and you need to determine through that process whether you can give that to them. And if not, walk away, right? And there will be many other people. There's lots of fish in the sea. But yeah, I would say that salespeople who are just yeah, I mean, I'm literally picturing faces in my mind that they do that well.
It's funny. You just said something that I think is a quote we would pull if we were writing a book. You don't want something from them. they want something from you. Boy, isn't that the attitude that you have to have? And in your, I say it over and over, but in your business more than any other. And as I said, I'm not from that world. I didn't grow up in the insurance world. I've never sold insurance, but I do a lot of sales training, consulting, etc. in that world. For some reason, my philosophy and that particular type of sales seems to meld well. So I really feel it. And it's so much more important than anything else. It's not a widget. I say this, you can't just send it back if it doesn't fit. You don't know it doesn't fit until it's too late.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well said. Well said. There's no, almost like no second shot on a game, right? You're there when something bad happens or you're not.
Right.
Yeah. Well said.
So the technology is important. We need to lean into it and not lean on it. And I think we've established what the great factors are to being authentic, sincere, and I feel that from you more than most people that I talk to, that it's in you and it comes across. And maybe that's what it was when I said to you, you have this wonderful magnetic effect on people, and I felt it from the moment I met you. I think it's that, you are you, and you come with that, and I don't think that you can be better. There's not a way to be better at what you do. There's a way to be more of you at what you do, and then the results will come. I really believe that strongly, especially in that business. So as we wrap up, is there anything? Are there charities that you're passionate about that you want to talk about? Any parting words for sales professionals?
Oh gosh.
Talk to any shout outs of salespeople, sales companies listen to this, why they should talk to you about your business, all of the above. How do you want to wrap us up?
Oh gosh, yeah. That I could probably spend a couple minutes on all that, but I'll make it really brief. If you're interested in expanding the markets that you're in the insurance industry and you're wondering, like, how do I get more carriers without having that minimum threshold, minimum requirement that's really high, these high standards that I have to meet, come talk to me. If you want to maximize your revenue, come talk to me. Would love to talk to you about Indium. I think on a personal level, anybody who is in the independent space, keep going and stay true to who you are. And for those who are in the position of being able to purchase insurance, I would highly, highly recommend an independent agent. You can't go wrong. They are just wonderful humans, wonderful people, and you'll get amazing service and a great product at the end of the day. So just
Perfect.
Independence all the way.
Well, thank you, Sid Roe, and I appreciate it. I've loved having you on. And for anybody listening, if you like what you're hearing, subscribe, give us the stars wherever, all that stuff counts. And we'll have in the show notes all the ways to get a hold of Sid, to reach out to her via LinkedIn, email, whatever. And Sid, thank you so much.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate you. Yes, always good to see you.
Ready to take your sales team or event to the next level? Visit franksomma.com to discover how Frank can coach your top performers, deliver a tailored workshop for your team, or captivate your audience with a content-packed keynote at your next event. Frank's best-selling book, B2B is really P2P, is now available on Amazon and Frank's website. Here's a special offer. As a valued listener, mention this podcast when you contact Frank and receive a 10% discount on your first coaching session, keynote, or workshop booking.
That's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Selling in the Age of AI. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all of the topics we discussed, and of course, to connect with our amazing guests. I have to shout out big love to my production team, Neeks, Angelo, Nico of Digital Presence. You guys rock. If you want your digital presence to explode, check these guys out at digitalpresence.team. And until next time, remember, people can't point and click you. Be the difference maker for your prospects and clients.